Good afternoon. Let me turn my music down here. It's a little loud, ain't it? Good afternoon. We are kind of finally feels like starting the year. Last week was kind of crazy. We had a lot of snow here where I live. But this is the first kind of Monday where it feels like a normal work day in 2025. So, yeah, it's lunchtime. And so I think one of the things I'm going to try to do on a daily basis is use that lunchtime to advance some projects. And I figure why not stream at the same time? So I didn't really do much over this past weekend. But yeah, so today I'm gonna try to tackle more of this Anthropic client. I did work on it a little bit over the weekend. I implemented. I think the last time I streamed, I was working on implementing. Well, let's go to their docs. That's probably easier. I was working on implementing retrieve message batch results, I think is what I was the last time. And I think I got that working last time I streamed. But since then, I've actually implemented listing message batches. So I've got that done over here. Yeah, let's see. So here's getting message batch results, and then I don't probably have the latest changes. Get poll. Yeah, so I did quite a bit of work on. I guess over the couple days, I just didn't stream it. So this was what I implemented off stream. Listing message batches async, which is basically just getting a single page of batches. And so I think what I'm going to work on this afternoon is going to be on doing that same exact thing. And by same exact thing, I mean it's going to be on listing message batches, but I'm going to try to list. I'm going to list all. So I did this with the models API too. So I have a method that allows you to get one page at a time called list models async. And then I have another method that helps take care of a lot of that boring pagination logic for you by just returning an enumerable that you can then iterate over, right? And that enumerable will take care of advancing your pages for you. Because I just think there's a lot of times where when you're working with paginated data, you want to be able to go through all of it, and it's kind of boring to have to re-implement that paging logic yourself. Seems like that's something a library should do for you. And the async enumerable is a great interface, I feel like, in C# to do that for you, right? It allows you to just do a wait for each var response in responses, and then as those responses come back, you can handle them, right? You can within the loop, you can handle them however you'd like to handle them. So that's what I'm going to try to do today. So let's start by trying to follow good test-driven development. We'll write an integration test to start with. So back. I feel like integration test is a nice place to start, especially when you're doing list all message batches async. When called, it should return all batches. I feel like integration tests are a nice place to start because they kind of help you think through what you want that kind of end API to look like. Um, how do you want the user of your client or your class or your API to interact with your code or your system that you're building? And you can sort of you can sort of code with wishful thinking, and then you can sort of backfill in what you need to support um, that idealized API or interface. It's hard to me that the one caveat I'll say that's harder to do sometimes when you're building GUI stuff. GUI stuff feels a little bit more difficult to do that, but um, I feel like it's worth the value. Okay, so what do I want to do here? So I'm gonna hit the same endpoint I'm hitting up here. Yeah. So I did this with the models. Let's see. List all models. There we go. I'm basically doing this exact same thing. The only difference is the shape of the data. So I'm just going to copy this test. And paste that in here. But now this is going to be when list message batch request. And we're not going to respond with this. We're going to respond with a message response. Yeah, or a message batch response. So just grab this, paste that in here. There we go. Okay, so yeah, and then after ID 1, this will be not list all models async, it'll be list all message batches async, like that. And then the collected pages, it won't be an Anthropic model, it will be a message batch response. And this now should be equivalent to new page of message batch response. List. It's a list of pages. Let's see. This is our test batch. There's probably a lot of work I could do in these tests to clean up some of the... I could dry these tests up quite a bit. There's a lot of duplicated stuff that I could dry up. Let's see. Why doesn't it like this? Oh, because it should be because this is a page, not a message response. So this should actually be data. Oh, data equals new not date, data. That, there we go. Now we're happy. And actually, expected message batch response. So I don't really care too much about this data here. This doesn't really need to be unique. This is going to be yeah, there we go. Now the one thing I do need to fill out there is it should be this should be first ID equal 1, last ID, and this should be true. Another one of these. And the only difference here should be this should be 2, this should be 2, this should be false. If everything goes right. Yeah, and now I just need to implement this method. So let's see. It should be up here, and it should be called task. No, not task. async enumerable. Yep. Yep. Limit of 20. And we just need a comment here. Thank you, GitHub Copilot. Yep. Now we need to go down to the actual implementation. Implement that interface. And we're going to move it up. We want and then we are going to inherit our dot comment. So now our test should fail if we run the test now. So if we run our test now, it should fail with a not implemented exception. Yep. Okay, now we need to implement it. So really the logic is going to be very similar to this method right here. The only difference is the model that we're returning. So we can probably, let me copy that and paste it here, but I'm thinking we can probably have a private method. Let's see, it's not the models endpoint. This would be message batches endpoint. Yeah, message batches endpoint. We'll make this async. And the only difference here is the batch. This should be deserializing to this. Should be like that. think that alone should now pass our test. No? Failed to match mocked request. URL matches v1 match. Oh. So when I'm mocking the requests, I have two different mocks. So the first one mocks the initial request, which doesn't have a specified it doesn't have a specified after ID. It just has a limit. And I updated that to the correct endpoint, which is the when list message batches request, but I didn't update here, so that needs to be updated there. And let's see now if that's what you get for copy and pasting. Yep, there you go. Okay, cool. So that works. We need to write some other tests for happy pass and sad pass. But before we do that, so when I'm doing this logic, so like here, this is the same logic. This is basically just the core pagination logic, right? The only difference is the type of model that I'm returning, what type of page data I'm returning. So we can probably extract this out to a generic method and then just pass the type as a type parameter. So let's work on that real quick. What do we want to call it? It's just going to be a private method. It's not going to be a public method. So we'll go down here. And so the signature of this thing is going to look very much like this. I think, but this is not going to be Anthropic model. This is going to be T. And this is going to be T. And this is going to be get all. I think I'm going to call it get all pages async. Oh, and this should be private, not public. Private. Okay, and then let's just move the logic for one of these things. Just move the logic for one of these things in here. And then let's just start working on refactoring it. So we'll pass our limit. So this is going to have to be different, the endpoint. So we're going to need to pass our endpoint. We'll say string endpoint. And then this endpoint is a local function because I'm changing the paging requests. So we need this endpoint to be basically resolved each time we get through to this loop. We still want the headers, we still want the content. We don't want to just serialize this to a specific model. This is going to be T. This will be T. This will be T. And this will be T. And I think with that, we can then replace our usage up here. So let's replace our usage. Let's replace it here. This is what we just implemented. So now all we need to really do here is say, this can actually probably be an expression body. So this is going to just be, yeah, you got it, Copilot. Let's see, get up. Cannot return a value from an iterator. Please use the yield return. Oh, okay. Yep. Yep. So we need to do this actually. Await. Like that. But now that all that logic, all that paging logic is in one place. So this should still work. So let's go back to our test. This was working. Should still work. Cool. That still works. Okay, so now let's replace this same thing, but let's replace it with this one because it's doing the same thing too. And this will not be message batches. This will be what will this be? This will be models, and this will be anthropic. Anthropic. That. Okay, so let's rerun. Let's run all my tests, or all my integration tests. Run all these guys. Nice. Okay, cool. So yeah, so now we have, that's nice. So now we have all this paging done for us, which I'm gonna write a blog post on this because C# and I'm sure other languages do, but I know for a fact, and I've used them before, C# and JavaScript or TypeScript have this idea of this async iterable, which, I mean, it just makes dealing with, I mean, I just don't understand in today's world if paging data is a best practice, which I don't disagree with. You should page your data. To me, that means that writing pagination logic to actually page the data is not really value add, right? So, any library that you're working with, or any technology that you're working with should really abstract that for you. You shouldn't have to worry about how do I page through this data. They should allow you, like that. They should provide a release valve, right? Which is why I implemented two different methods. You should definitely have the ability to retrieve a single page of data, and you should have the ability to write your own pagination logic if you want to do that. But in my opinion, there should be some way for you to just rely on they've already worked out that logic for you. You should just be able to say if you want to run through all the data that you're trying to retrieve that fits your query, or maybe you're trying to extract all the data from some endpoint. You should just be able to iterate over it, and then within that iteration, transform it or collect it or do whatever you were wanting to do with it, without really having to think about it too much. Okay, so I need to write happy path, or no, sad pass and happy path. So or do I? Because now that I put all this logic into this method, all of this is already covered. I already have tests written because I'm using this in another place. I already have tests written that basically test all the branches of this code. So I probably actually don't need to. I do want to add a let's see, Anthropic API client end-to-end. I do want to write an end-to-end test. So let's say fact public async task list all message batches async when called, it should return response. And these end-to-end tests for me are more of smoke tests. So let's see. Yes. Should have count greater than 0. Yeah. What do I want to assert here? This toList async also, if you're wondering, so obviously this method doesn't return a task; it returns an enumerable. But there is a library, and it is called, I forget what it's called. It's like system.link. Basically, it's a library that helps you deal with let's see. Anthropic client. I don't think it's in here. I think I added it to Anthropic API client. Anthropic client. It's this one, system.link.async. Basically, it allows you to work with those async enumerable interface. It basically gives you a bunch of those extension methods that you're used to using to do things like this, right? So normally you'd have to do something like bar responses, but you would say underscore client dot list all batches async, and then you would say await for each response, and you'd iterate over it. So what that package does is it just allows you to have all those really nice extension methods to do normal, link things off of the end of the off the asynchronous enumerable, which is nice. So yeah, that's what that's about, in case you're wondering. So yeah, so I think what all I want to do here is I just want to create a batch, and then what do I want to do? I guess I just want to make sure that there should be more than one response, but I think I need to set a limit here for that to be the case. So the end-to-end tests are against a live endpoint. Anthropic only keeps batches for 29 days. So when this test run, I don't actually know that there are going to be multiple batches. I think right now there are, because I've been working on this and testing so much. I think there's quite a few batch results out there that are still, that haven't expired, haven't been archived yet. So I think what I actually want to do is I want to create 2 batch requests as part of this test. Then I want to retrieve those, and I want to retrieve 1 page at a time, and then I want to assert that I have at least 2 pages of data. So I'm gonna do so I'm just gonna have bar create request. That's it's going to be a little lambda function that takes in a string, which is going to be the ID. And then I'm going to say bar request number 1, request number 2, and we'll say create result 1. I know this is very sophisticated naming. Create result 2. And then what I can do here is I'll say limit the page size to 1. Limit it to 1. And then I'm going to say responses. So this is a list of pages, or it's a list of results of pages, right? So it's telling me it'll tell me if the result to get a page succeeded or failed. So what I'll do is I'll say so I'm going to say should have count greater than 2 if everything's going correctly, everything's happy pass. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say responses dot select r dot value and actually I'm going to say where r dot is success dot select r dot value. So this is the page, and then I'll say select r dot data, which is the actual the data is the actual batches, and then I'll say should contain single let's see, what is this? So at this point, var batches, right? This should be a list of batches. Oh no, this should be select many. Yeah. Then what I can do is I can say batches should contain that, and batches should contain that. So I may have more. Like right now, I'm probably going to have like 20 or 40 batches in here, but I just want to make sure that the 2 that I just created are in there. And if everything's working correctly, that should always be true, regardless of when I run this test. I'm gonna debug this just so I can see. Yeah, so see, I've got 49 batches out there. So, but let's see. Yeah, I've got a lot. But I should the newest ones should be custom ID, or no, this, so value. It should be in there, so let's step over it. Yep, that's true, and that's true. Okay, cool. So that'll be my intent test. And that's it, I think, for tests. Let's run the full suite. test. Run the full suite. This way I can just check my code coverage. My code coverage should be the same. I was thinking I need to write some happy paths and sad paths for the new method, but I don't because I refactored all that logic into a single private method, and there's another method using it which already explores all of those happy sad paths. So I shouldn't need to do that. So let's go ahead and look at my report here. There we go. Yeah, we're sitting at basically 100%. There's a couple of places where I don't have 100% coverage. It's not a big deal. Okay, cool. So then let's push up these changes. Let's see. What did we do? I always like to see if GitHub can write me a good commit message. If you use VS Code, there's this little magic button there. Add list all batches async method and corresponding tests. I like that. Yep, that'll do it. Sync changes. W, close that out. We're getting close to getting this feature done. Let's see. We only have 2 more methods to implement to support the batches API. We need to support canceling a message and deleting a message, which for deleting, I think I have to add 1 model. I need to add 1 model to represent this response. But for canceling a batch, it's just a message batch response. So I already have a model to represent that. I just need to implement the method logic. What time is it? 12:45. 15. Can I do it in 15 minutes? I can get started. I don't know if I'll finish, but so again, we'll just start in the same way. Anthropic API client tests. We'll start with the integration test. I need to break these tests up. I'm almost over 2,000 lines in this test file. I probably should separate the tests out into whatever they're testing, like the batches API, they have I am gonna, not to get sidetracked, but they do have there's another API that I need to support for this, which is their admin API. And I think for that, I'm actually going to do a whole separate client. I need to do some exploration, but based on what I've read in their documentation, so all of these APIs up here use a different API key from their admin API. Like they're distinctly different types of keys that have distinctly different types of permissions. And so I don't know if I should extend. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I want to extend. Yeah, I think I'm going to make a separate client basically. Yeah, I shouldn't say, I don't know how I'm going to do that, right? Because well, what's the button? It's like 2K. Yeah. So my API, so right now the SDK has 1 client. It has 1 client, and it takes in an HTTP client. And that client, or my client, sets the API key in the headers of this HTTP client, and they use the same header values. So they both use x-api-key as the header key. So there needs to be like an admin client, is what I'm thinking. There needs to be an admin client. And that needs to have a separate HTTP client instance. Because this guy is going to want to set the header, the X API key header. So I'm thinking right now, I haven't actually started doing anything with it, but I'm thinking right now there's going to be two separate clients in my library, one to do the admin interactions and one to do everything else, because they need different keys. Because otherwise, what would I have to do? Otherwise, I'd have to have this client take in two different keys, and then depending on the method being called, I would have to add a header to that specific request, or I'd have to add the right key for that specific request. Which, I don't know, maybe that feels better. It feels weird. Because right now the client really, the headers are not on a request basis. The headers are just for the whole client, right? If you want to set, basically all clients are, all headers are being applied to the HTTP client that's passed in. And so if I did go down that path, then I need to have some hook to allow adding additional headers to each individual request being made. Possibly. I don't know. Or maybe you just say, hey, if you're passing in the HTTP client, whatever headers are on that client are gonna get added to every request, and the library is just gonna. I don't know. I don't know what they're. I might look at. Anthropic has. They have two SDKs themselves. I might look at how their SDKs handle this. See, they have a TypeScript library, and they have a Python library. Oh, they do the whole. See, they have the same idea with the async enumerables, where you can just iterate over all your batches. I swear I did not. I've not looked at this documentation before, but I feel like if you're doing pagination, this seems like a pretty obvious idea to have in your library. Yeah, they don't really talk about the admin API, do they? Let's see. I know I've gotten completely distracted from the actual. I wonder what this is. Auth token versus API key. Override the default base URL. I should probably support that at some point. I don't think right now you can override the base URL in my library, but at some point you're probably going to need to be able to do that. Oh, weird. So they don't have a... This is the beta. This is the models, the messages, completions. What is API beta? Auth headers, bare auth. I should probably add some logging to my library too. Like I could accept a logger as a constructor argument, and then that would probably be a nice experience. So does their library not even have support for the admin API right now? Is it new enough? Admin API? Huh. I know I've gotten completely distracted um, from doing what we were supposed to be doing, and now I'm going to run out of time to actually work on it. But I'm just kind of interested in what their approach is. But this is all their repositories. So they have a Java one, they have a TypeScript, a Python, they have Go. I wonder when they're going to write a C# one, and then there will no longer be need for me to do what I'm doing right now. Yeah, so it looks like Git user. It doesn't look like they're supporting their admin API in this library, which is kind of interesting. Huh. Anyways, whenever I get around to it, I guess I'll have to solve that problem. I'm thinking it should be two different clients, though, is what I'm thinking. There'll be like Anthropic API client and Anthropic admin API client, is what I'm thinking. Okay, so going back to what we were supposed to be doing, let's see. We were supposed to be trying to cancel a message batch. So I've got 7 minutes. We can implement this in 7 minutes. Let's see. That's the last test we wrote. Fact. Public async task cancel message batch async. When called, it should excuse me. So we can actually use get message batch async. We can actually use this as a good starting spot. You know what? This is way too this should just be result.value.should be equivalent to. This should just be new message batch response, and then come on, GitHub Copilot. There you go. There we go. That can just be one single assertion. Okay, what was I doing? Yeah, so let's copy this. And put that down here. Because basically it's the same, it's the same exact thing. The only thing that's different is the method I'm going to be calling. So it shouldn't be when get message batch request, it will be when cancel. And so I need to I need to implement that here. Public static request and not delete. This is what method are they using? Post. Well, actually, it's post and then it's cancel, because that is specifically cancel. Right? Yeah. Right here. Yeah. Okay. Easy enough. It's a post. It's a cancel. We're sending it to particular. And then my feeling is like it should respond with this processing status sent to cancel, right? But they're showing it as being in progress. So I honestly don't know. But all I do know for this test is that I should be able to call, cancel, message, batch, async, and I should be able to give it a batch ID, and it should respond with the message batch, which is what this is doing. So it should also handle errors, right? So it can respond with a bad request. So we should have another test that's going to be fact, public, async, task, cancel, message, batch, async. When called, it should return. When called and fails, it should return. Come on, Copilot. Help me out. Should return there. Yep, there we go. That can just be invalid request. I don't know. Or maybe just like batch not found would be more apropos. There you go. Okay, well, let's go to our client. Let's add, what do you want to do? I want to add it here. This should be a task of Anthropic result, and it should be a message batch response. We should cancel. I tell you what, Copilot is just a superpower when it comes to doing docs and comments like this. I mean, you still have to check it because sometimes it does weird stuff, but man, it saves a lot of time. Okay, and now I need to go down here and implement it. I bet Copilot could do this for me. It already does want to do it. And right, you always want to make sure your tests fail. should build. It should build now though. That's the whole point of like going and putting the method on the interface and putting a not implemented implementation of it is so that you can actually compile and run your tests and see them fail, and then you should be able to obviously write the implementation, rerun it again, and see them succeed. That's that whole idea of like in test-driven development. That's the whole idea of red, green, red, green, red, green, red, green. And this one should fail. Yep. Okay. So now though, we'll let Copilot do its implementation for us, huh? Which is one of the nice parts about Copilot. Once you've gotten a client, like once you have a class this big and there's this much context and there's clear patterns, like there's very clear patterns of how each method, like each method basically looks like this, where we're making a request, we're getting the headers, we're getting the content, and then we're figuring out if it's successful or if it failed, and then based on whether it was successful or it failed, we're deserializing it to a particular object, right? So once it's one of the things I feel like using Copilot for the last year and a half or 2 years is it's exceptionally good in this context. Like it will almost nail the implementation time and time again. Maybe with a little bit of work from you, but it's usually pretty good. So let's see. Yeah, endpoint can be that. Var response can be this. Say var Anthropic headers. Oh, need to await this. Await. Yeah. And then we'll do down here. Just like that. This actually too, now that I'm thinking about this, I probably there's probably some abstraction that can be done with this. Like basically if I just genericize this parameter, like I can probably turn this into like a handle response method or something like that, right? Just pass in this response message and just say handle response and give it some generic type parameter. I should probably look at doing that. In any event, my lunch time is over, so let's see if I was able to get the cancel working. Okay, that failed. Why did it fail? Oh, because this send request async is always a get, and this one is always a post, which isn't gonna work anymore. So I think what I'll do is I'll just say HTTP method, and we will default this to the get. Okay, so then let's make this null. Our request method is going to be that or that, and instead of get, this will be send, and instead of an endpoint, it'll be a request method. Does it have a request method? doesn't have an overload for that. Boo. Boo. I feel like it should just have an overload that takes an endpoint and a... That's fine. So then this is going to be request. Method endpoint. Yep. And then that. And then up here, where I'm using it for cancellation. That's it. Cancel. Cancel. To endpoint, it should be HTTP method, which is this. This is probably not really great what I'm doing here with these two methods. I should probably, I don't know. But it works for this particular case. It's fine. It doesn't handle everything, but I've just been evolving it over time as my needs have evolved. So I don't think that's anything for me to worry about at the moment. Okay, let's go back to my test. Now my test should pass. Famous last word. Now my test should pass. Let's see. Yeah, perfect. And one more time here. Nice. Okay, so I have integration tests that say this work. I need to write an end-to-end test, and then I also want to come back, and before I move on from this, I want to factor this out. So this case happens again and again in my code, where if I can't deserialize it, I give it an empty error, and if I can't deserialize it, then I give it an empty model. What I think I could do here is I could actually change this into like genericize this and then just say I could say t, and then I could have a constraint here that's like where t is new or something like that. I think is how you do it. Where t is new. And then I'd be able to do something like that. So I think I might try to refactor towards that. Because that would save me a lot of test cases. I have a bunch of test cases that are specific to each of my methods that do that basically test to say, hey, if deserialization gives you a null, make sure you get an empty error object back, or you get an empty response object back. And if I was to factor this back to one method, every time I add a method to my client, I wouldn't have to also add sad case tests for these paths. So that's something I think I'm going to look at doing, at least for all the methods that have this kind of a signature. It should be possible to do. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's gonna do it for my stream, at least today. It's my lunch time's over. I need to go back to work. But I'm gonna try to do this as often as I can during the week. Is use my lunch hour to work on something for a little while now. It'll probably be, unless I'm feeling bored with it for a little while, it'll probably be doing stuff with this SDK. At least until I get this. Once I get the message batches API supported, I'll probably take a break before I start on the admin API, and maybe work on something else. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I hope this is enjoyable. I'm not I'm by far an expert on any of this stuff. It's just stuff I like to do. I find it fun, enjoyable way to spend your time, or spend my time. And so if you're following along, I appreciate it. So I will see you guys the next time. Which I don't really have. Again, I don't really have a guaranteed schedule or when I'll be around, but whenever I see you, I'll see you. Hope you're having a good start to your week. I'll talk to you guys later.